so I know you can't see me, but it is what it is. So I just find it interesting. Now, I don't remember the exact details, so I'm just going to say what I think I remember. Some of these details may be a little bit off. But if I remember these details at least closely correctly, there was a guy. I don't know if he was an engineer. I don't know if he's just a newspaper columnist. I don't know if he was, whatever he was. But there's a guy that said that working on flight is just such a waste of time or something like that, because in his mind, it would take the concerted effort of the entire human race, whose sole dedication and purpose was to invent a flying machine. He basically said that it would, in his mind, it would take no less than 100,000 years if the entire human race solely focused on inventing a time machine before we might finally build a flying machine. And then 2 weeks later, the Wright brothers did it. And then, it just gets even worse from there, because then if you think about it, then just a few decades later, we're having wars with these planes. Like actual, I am even talking about World War I, like World War II, like we were doing like really, all kinds of shit with planes, right? And then, within 42 years of this guy saying that, of a not that dedicated effort, we have the power of the sun that we can unleash upon our enemies to wipe out entire cities with one bomb. And we use a flying machine to deliver that. Not that it's a good thing, but we could do that. Within less than half a century later, we're not only having flying machines, but we're using them to wipe out cities, unfortunately, with the power of the fucking sun. All right, so just for further contrast, and to make it even more contrasted, which I think is more relevant in this case, not only did we do all that, but within less than 100 years, around 60 to 70 years later, something like that. I guess it was 60 years later. I forget the exact timeline. We went beyond the flying machine into a rocket that can send men on the moon. And then we did that. We sent men, as our human race, we sent men to the moon. And then within a few years after that, still less than a century after this guy's plans, we made going to the moon boring to where people were like, yeah, we don't care about this. They'd rather watch paint dry than watch men go to the moon or watch anyone go to the moon. That's how boring going to the moon became in less than 100 years after this guy said that. So I just think that's interesting that I'm not trying to make any political points or anything here. I'm just saying I think it's interesting how this person probably had every reason to think, because we still don't, scientifically speaking, we have so many books and things talking about why planes work, but technically we don't actually fully know all the reasons why planes work. We just know that they do, and we know how to make them work even better, but we don't know really all the physics scientifically behind why flight's supposed to work. And a lot of things they put in books, even reputable books, are technically wrong. Although, with some of them, there's truths to what they're saying, so I'm not trying to say it's a complete farce, but it's just, we don't even, so what I'm saying is to give this guy some credit. He had a lot of valid reasons for saying what he said. I don't know about the 100,000 years of concerted effort. Maybe that was valid, maybe not. But it just goes to show how interesting something can be, where someone does say something at least somewhat reasonable. Again, maybe I don't know if 100,000 years was reasonable or not, but he said something at least somewhat reasonable as an opinion, and then they're just completely blown out of the water of how wrong they were. It's just, life is like that sometimes. He's like, we basically, humankind's never going to get a flying machine, and then we go to the moon less than a century later. We have those same flying machines carrying the power of the sun as a bomb, even way before that. And then just 2 weeks, again, just to reiterate all this, just 2 weeks after he said that, if I remember right, it's 2 weeks later, or less, the first flying machine, the first legitimate flying machine, other than blimps and hot air balloons, of course, I mean, all this is precluding that kind of stuff, was invented. So, I mean, yeah, that guy was, less than 100 years later, pretty much everything happened. I mean, this guy would have only had better luck if he just said that we never have GTA 6. It would take the 100,000 years of concerted human effort to get GTA 6, I guess. And people have been like, what the hell is GTA 6? Or GTA? But at least that would have been somewhat more correct. Anyway, I just think it's interesting. Again, not make any points, or I'm not really trying to allude to anything now. I'm just saying, sometimes I just think about that. About how mind-bogglingly wrong people can be and how quickly they can end up being wrong, regardless of having reasons to be right. Again, I don't know if the 100,000 years actually made sense or not. Maybe it did. But just to think that, we wouldn't have made a flying machine for at least 100 or 1,000 years probably was much more reasonable, especially to people at the time. I mean, I don't even think we fully figured out germ theory by that point. Anyway, so, yeah. It's ridiculous now. If you think back at the time, it made a little bit more sense. But regardless of whether it makes sense or not, it was just, like, the heavens opened and said, I'm about to make you wrong 7 billion ways to Sunday. And still have my ice cream too. I don't know. Anyway, signing out.